Hi guys, so I thought we could do a bit more on lesson planning on this channel. So today we'll look at one of the frameworks. We'll look at the stages, we'll look at example activities, and just see what it's all about. So yeah, let's dive in. Without further ado, text-based presentation. So we'll look at the stages first and then see what they're all about. So just like any other lesson, you're going to start with a lead-in. After that, you're going to pre-teach some blocking lexes because there will be some reading or listening after that. So that's something we need to do. Once you're done pre-teaching, your reading or listening for gist comes. They're only going to read once or listen to something once in this lesson because it's not a skills lesson, it's a system. So you're not teaching them a reading lesson, it's a grammar or vocab lesson. But you use that text to kind of introduce the language that you're going to teach a bit further in. Once that's done, they're going to look for specific language in the text. We'll look at some ways of how you can elicit that a bit later. Once they know what to pay attention to, once you have your target language, once you have your marker sentences, you're going to clarify your target language, which covers meaning, form, and pronunciation. Then you have your controlled practice, your freer practice, and some language feedback. Those are the stages. Now let's look at each of them. We'll look at the stage aims and an example task or an activity. So what would you be doing at each of those stages? So imagine I'm about to teach a lesson on future probability. It's a B2 class. I'm using Speak Out B2 3rd edition. It's just a sample I found online on Pearson's website. So yeah. So this is what the material looks like. It's Unit 2. There is my text, so it's a reading lesson. And then that's the bit that they give me for language clarification. So let's see what we're going to do with it. As you can see, the topic is virtual reality. So essentially, my lead-in is going to be all about that. So the purpose of your lead-in is to introduce the lesson topic and activate your students' schemata. Now, schemata is something, it's a term that we borrowed from psychology, and it's a person's understanding and knowledge of the world around them. It's important for an English lesson and any foreign language lesson because then once the context is clear, it kind of lets them decode the meaning of the language. So they rely on their knowledge of the world to help them understand the language used to describe it. So yeah. And then the activity for this is in pairs, brainstorm 5 ways of using VR. So they work together, you do some feedback, you can put their ideas on the board. Doesn't really matter. You will use this a bit further on when you do a gist reading. So just in the lesson that I planned, you don't have to, not in every text-based lesson you do this, but the way I designed it, yeah, I would. Then I pre-teach my blocking lexes. Now, this is one of the flexible stages. It doesn't necessarily have to be there. The stage aim at this point is to help them understand the text a little bit better by clarifying any of the words that you think might confuse them. Now, you're not going to teach them everything. You only teach them the words that they need to understand to be able to complete the task. Again, if you think that nothing's going to confuse the students, if you know them well and you're like, yeah, no, they'll deal with this, fine, you don't have to do it. In this lesson, my hypothetical students would look at those words and the task would be to match the words and definitions. Oh, wow, that should be the other way around. So they'd be matching the words and definitions there. So that's it. Once that is clear, they read for gist. Now, the purpose of it is to introduce the target language in context, and it's only a gist reading, so they only need to understand the big picture. They don't need to understand any subtle details of the text. That's why your pre-teaching lexis might not be happening because you only need them to understand like the overall meaning of the text. Now, an example, the way I designed this lesson. So in my lead-in, they had to brainstorm some potential ways of using VR. And now the gist reading would be, okay, now read the text, check your ideas. Does it mention any of the things that you had on your list? You have 3 minutes, go. Whatever gist task you design, this time limit there is essential. Just reading, it's okay if they're stressed. Like, it's not a task that should be comfortable for them. You want to avoid them reading every single word and trying to understand every single sentence. It's a different subskill. They need to skim through the text very quickly, get the general idea, boom, you're done. That's it, that kind of thing. Now, they read for gist. Now I need them to notice my target language, right? So I'm teaching, it's a grammar lesson. I'm teaching ways of talking about future. So the whole point is for them to notice the language. So a task that I could potentially use here would be, right, look at the text that you just read, underline the sentences where we have special words or phrases to talk about future. I would do it with a stronger class or if I had more time, but it's another flexi stage. So you don't necessarily need to elicit the target language. You can just show it to them. So another way is just boom. Here are some sentences from the text. We're going to look at them now. Pay attention, that kind of thing. Up to you. Again, elicitation might be a bit challenging for the lower level students, especially if their language awareness isn't that great. So you know how like sometimes your students' production is great, but they have no idea why they're saying the things they're saying. So yeah, for lower levels, that might be challenging and time consuming. Feel free to just being like, boom, that's what we're going to look at. So yeah, that's just a different way of doing it. So yeah, once they know what you're going to be looking at, they can forget about the text. It's gone now. Like, they have the context. They know they read a text about VR and it was all about the future, blah, blah, blah. Great. Now you narrowed it down to those 8 sentences. Okay. And now you clarify, which is essentially your teaching stage. Okay. So you clarify appropriate aspects of meaning, form, and pronunciation. I say appropriate because it doesn't mean that you're going to teach them everything about a given structure or about a given phrase or whatever. If you imagine teaching present simple to elementary students, right, you're probably going to use it for your routines and that's it. You're not going to mention any other meanings of present simple. So that's what I mean by appropriate aspects. So you need to narrow it down so that your context reflects the meaning of the target language, if that makes sense. So you have those 3 big sections: meaning, form, pronunciation. Meaning also covers use, so appropriacy. So your register, your formality, your style, that's part of meaning. So yeah. For example, this is what the book suggests they do for meaning. So it's a little gap fill thing. They look at the sentences, they have some rules there, and then based on the context that you've already established, because they've already read the text, they're gonna gap fill with the words or phrases based on the text they've read. A task like that you'd call a guided discovery task. I'm not going to go into depth of why it's a guided discovery or what a guided discovery is. I might make another video based on this, but it's a very student-centered way of doing it, like a very student-led approach to clarification. So yeah, that's it. So just like this, you would also do something on form and pronunciation, probably drill. Yeah, so there's that. Once you clarified, so you taught the thing, you did your bit. Now, controlled practice. And the whole purpose of your controlled practice is to understand whether your students need any further clarification or they're fine with it and they're ready to use it. So your controlled practice is very black and white, very right or wrong kind of activity. Again, an example that the book gives you, this is from the workbook. But again, speak out, upprint, a gap fill, right? So they need to paraphrase. They have an original sentence, then they need to open the brackets, use the forms, use the phrases that we taught them, keep the meaning, change the form kind of bit. So that's an example of controlled practice. So open the brackets, fill in the gaps, that kind of thing. You don't give them too much freedom here because you only care about them understanding the rules. So the meaning, form, pronunciation. Now, that being said, controlled practice doesn't always have to be written. It could be oral if you want to test pronunciation as well. So yeah, but we might look into it in another video. So once you do a controlled, you're happy with the results. They all are doing great. They have no questions, no wrong answers. Wonderful. You can move on. Freer practice. And as the name suggests, you're going to give them an opportunity to practice using the target language and to kind of personalize it, to make it their own, to try and manipulate language, see how they feel about using it. Now, you're not going to tell them what language to use. You need to design a task that kind of conditions them, and your task needs to make it almost impossible to avoid using your target language. But the higher the level you teach, the more difficult it is to design such a task. Because at this point, like at the B2 level, they probably have enough basic grammar to be able to express their ideas about future. So they might not use everything that you taught them in this lesson. And that's fine. There is a point when you will address it. We'll look at it later. So anyways, my freer practice, a very low effort kind of task. Not impressed with this one, but they work in pairs and they make a list of 5 predictions about the future. Again, very little thought went into it, but it does the trick. I give them a chance to use the target language, but I'm not telling them use the phrases from today. That's the key bit. Now, they do it. I do not interrupt them because that's freer practice, so it's all about fluency. I take notes, though. I'm monitoring and taking notes. So when the time comes, it's language feedback. There are 3 types of things that you can address here. You can praise them. So if they give you a great sentence like this one, offices could disappear completely, everyone's going to work from home. Great. Could was one of my target language elements. They used it in a sentence. Great. Perfect. Well done. Another thing, error correction, obviously. So if somebody says that AI might too replace doctors, I'm going to address that, right? So I'm going to be like, how do we fix this? Not completely right. And again, because at this level, they probably have enough grammar without me telling them. They have enough grammar knowledge to be able to talk about the future and maybe avoid using the language I taught them. That's another thing that you address. So in my example here, everything is will. Everything will be online. People will use their computers. They will not leave their homes. So those sentences are fine. Like there's nothing wrong with them. But again, the students avoided. They had a perfect chance of using the target language, but they avoided. And I'm going to draw their attention to it. So I'm going to elicit and I'll be like, right, what else can you say? How can we paraphrase this? How can we upgrade it a little bit so it's a bit more of a higher level grammar or vocab use here? So those are the 3 things that you can potentially include in your language feedback. That's it. That's all I have to say about this lesson framework. Now, I did mention a couple of things that I might address later in other videos, like things like freer practice ideas or what a guided discovery is, but that's for later. I'm about to make videos about a couple more lesson frameworks. Let's see how that goes. As always, thank you guys for watching the video. Follow me on Instagram, add me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to hear from you. And yeah, I'll see you next week. Bye.